All right. I think we might be live. So, welcome everyone. My name is Ben here, and we've got David Hall as well. And I think Kennedy is joining us at this precise moment. Welcome, Kennedy. Welcome to the stream. All right.
Hello.
We're jumping right in. All right. So, and of course, I don't quite have things set up as usual. I'll fix it, I promise. Just give me 1 second. Hide self-view. There we go. All right. So, what I'll say today, just to kind of kick us off, is I have some thank yous to make to the folks who came to the last stream, and I wanted to share those real quick. First thank you I wanted to make is, let me see here if I could find my thank yous. Excellent, here we go. Okay, first thank you is, I wanted to say a huge thank you to the person who told me about all these tips for OBS related things. That's David Matthew. Thank you, David. I'm not going to apply all of them. As you can see, I'm still learning how to do the OBS thing. I'll go one at a time down that list of things and get better at this as we go along. Second thank you was to Jan and the others who gave us feedback on the new events page, which, by the way, there's a new events page. It's not fabulous or anything, but it is getting closer to good enough, or I should say better. I'm going to share a map here shortly just to show you what's going on with that. And let me see here if I can. Boom. All right. I've got the right Chrome window now streaming here, so little improvements. So let me just show you a map real quick. Here's a little map I made for lwm.events. And basically the story is I have been by hand putting events on our pages for the last several months, maybe a year at this point. And I realized that was prone to failure because I forgot to put our latest workshop up on there. So, whoops. So I thought, how can I fix this? How can I make it better? I dug in. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to take this by hand updating on the web-based event listing, and I'm going to shift it over to a plugin. And so I'm just going to show you on the map here. Here's what was going on before by hand, and I shifted to a plugin. And guess what? It broke a bunch of stuff. And it's got some cool things, like it uses Google Calendar as a backing, so I don't have to remember things. Just sort of keeping things, having a perfect memory of what's going on and everything. But the downside is there's a whole new way that I am or am not able to fill the needs of the Learn Wardley mapping users like yourself who want to see what events are coming up. So if you go to lwm.events and you see that events page and you check it out and you've got feedback for me, find me on Twitter @HiredThought or say something in the chat. And I just wanted to get that out of the way here real quick. But thank you to those who have given us feedback so far. All right. With that, we have a very special time here. We've got Kennedy Collins of ThoughtWorks, and we've got David Hall again of PostObject. And David, do you want to give a quick intro about yourself just so folks can catch up on who you are, and then we'll talk to Kennedy a little bit?
Yeah, sure. My name's David. I run PostObject, like Ben said. I am a consultant, and I help with a lot of design product related thinking, as well as I'm a frequent co-host and co-conspirator with Ben on some Wardley mapping stuff.
It's
so
the
it's
truth.
great to be here. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for being here. And of course, you all know me. My name is Ben Mosier. I run learnwardleymapping.com. I talk a lot about Wardley maps, probably too much. And today we're lucky to be joined by Kennedy Collins. Kennedy, I know you've got a little bit of a background in architecture, and I know that's sort of shifted more into the product space, but tell us a little bit about what you're all about and kind of what made you interested in Wardley mapping.
Yeah. So, yes, like you said, my undergrad degree is in architecture and buildings. I did a little bit of work there and graduated into, the terrible economic recession when no one was building anything. And so I had to figure out what to do with my life. And I had always been interested in technology and had done some marketing stuff in the past, and had moved into the startup scene. I was bounced from the startup scene in Chicago for a number of years. and kind of remapped all of my architecture thinking to kind of product and product management and a little bit of design.
Oh, fabulous.
And I actually think I continue to think that an architecture undergrad is one of the best educations you can get to be a product manager, but we can talk about that at some other point if you want. Anyway, so bounced from the startup scene for a while, joined ThoughtWorks about 2.5 years ago, right? Was interested in kind of getting that broader organizational perspective and learning what it was like to work with larger organizations, right? I had spent, I'll give you an example. My first client at ThoughtWorks was a Fortune 20 company, right? And so like, not only was the client obviously the largest company I'd ever worked with, not only was ThoughtWorks also the largest company I'd worked with, the ThoughtWorks team at the client was about the same size as the largest company I'd ever worked for. So
oh man, wow.
It was really just threw myself into the deep end in terms of kind of scale and stuff, but it's been a really exciting time. And now I am helping run our largest public sector account. And I am also taking on a new role in the near future as our head of product and design for the central market.
Fabulous.
I guess I technically have taken on that, but I'm not doing anything for it yet. Not really. Anyway, that's a whole thing for me to deal with. But I think that's relevant because we'll talk a little bit. I think that's kind of one of the things I'd like to talk about today as we talk about mapping and stuff.
Excellent. So what got you into the interest in Wardley mapping? Like what led you to this moment where we're all of a sudden going to do some mapping on the live stream?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in strategy, right? And kind of how we can approach things strategically and what strategy actually means. And just found the literature when I tried to dig into it just unsatisfying, let's say. It just didn't seem, it didn't quite kind of, there wasn't the amount of clarity that I expected and the rigor that I had hoped for, right? And I think when I came across Wardley mapping, I think Simon's Twitter in like 2016, I want to say 2017.
Okay.
I think my background in architecture and like visually representing ideas through maps, I'd always been interested in like cartography, actual maps, and also various planographic projections in architecture and that kind of stuff, and like how we use standardized ways of visually representing things in order to communicate ideas in abstraction.
Yep.
Which sounds familiar, I'm sure. And it kind of really resonated with me, and kind of really resonated as a way to think through these things visually, right? The other thing that I think about a lot when I think about mapping, right, is my undergraduate thesis professor, a man named David Mayernick. And we would sit and I would describe kind of what I was thinking and what I wanted to design and what I was going to draw and what the building was going to be like. He's like, cool, I guess, like you have to draw it. I can't tell you if it's good yet until you draw it. We can't look at this together and communicate about it together until you actually draw it.
Yep.
And I think that kind of also resonates with kind of this idea of mapping as kind of externalizing ideas and creating a shared artifact that we can talk about.
Yeah,
and
there's
again, kind of using the same language.
There's something really interesting about having to make the commitment of writing something down. Like some people talk to think, and that's great. Some people have to write to think, and that's also great. But when we're mapping, oftentimes we're having to do the thinking because putting the thing on paper is a commitment of a certain kind. And so part of like what I'm thinking about with all this is just like what tentative commitments are we making in what is literally often a design process? Like it's both making sense of what already is happening, but then also designing that system because we have a hope for it. Either we're not intentional about specific parts of it and we want to become intentional about it, or we want to change something that is already working in or not working to a certain extent. So I just sent you a link to a mural board so that you can follow along, or so we can do some mapping together. And for everyone else, I think I've got it up on the stream so you can see the background. It's been a while since I used Miro, but I think I've remembered how to add sticky notes. Hello. All right.
Good first step.
Great first step. And one of the things I always start with kind of a Wardley mapping session is kind of like this basic little template kind of thing. LWM.events/1 is a short link to a pretty simple like Wardley mapping template. It's like a part 1 of 2 kind of thing. And the first thing it has is a set of lists. And so I'm just going to paste this in here and like maybe we'll see if we can get away with doing some mapping on this with some lists. So what is the situation that you're thinking about right now? I know you're stepping into a new role. We also talked about some other scenarios. what would you like to map? Like, what's the kind of basic situation?
Yeah, so one of the big things that I'm being asked to do in my new role is help figure out a way to, I think that the term that we're using is kind of grow the community, or kind of grow the practice, right? But how we can identify and define, clearly define the skills that we need as a consulting organization to provide to our clients for them to get the outcomes they want. Now we can synthesize this, and then how we can make sure and help, provide the resources our consultants need to have these skills and to practice these skills, right?
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So
I
so
think that piece of a thing is, yeah, something I want to think about.
yeah. So what makes it like important and meaningful for you? What's the part of this that really like you connect with and you want to dig into more?
Yeah, there's two pieces, I think, right? One is this is not a time for me to pitch the organization I work for, but I do kind of really believe that kind of the way we approach a lot of this work is really important, right? And I think it's really valuable, and I think kind of the commitment to diversity and inclusion and the commitment to social and economic justice that the organization has is really important. And I fundamentally think that, like, if we can do more work, it will kind of net out to more good things happening in the world. So I really do believe in that, right? And the other piece of it for me, and so that's kind of helping clients, this helping client side of it, right, and helping them in ways that I think are valuable and ethical. And the other side of it is kind of this career growth thing, right? We've had historically, as an organization, we haven't provided a ton of support for product managers and designers, and we haven't kind of in a way that we have, I think, for developers and more technical folks, right? And so, I talk to these folks on our teams, and they're like, I don't know what the organization expects of me. I don't, do you have these resources? And those conversations end up happening, and I want to give everyone the resources they need, but I'm one person and we have a lot of consultants, and I can't do all this on my own one by one, right? And so how do I kind of take that thing that I've been able to do on a one-on-one basis with some of the folks on my team now, and kind of scale that in this new role, and kind of do
Got
that
it.
in a way that is more comprehensive and more, I don't want to say standardized exactly, but more, no, I guess standardized is the word I want.
Okay. So I heard a couple things, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sneak above the board in Mural, or I'm going to move some things around so I can just take some notes. And one of the first things I heard you say was, okay, so there's the part of like about doing what's right or helping people. How would you sort of define that way that you connect to that purpose of like helping your clients and doing purposeful things with your clients in order to have an impact? How would you describe that in kind of like a concise phrasing?
As in, like, how would I describe that desire or that need or that purpose? Or
Yeah, like my first gut like kind of reaction is like helping clients. Okay, great. Is
yeah,
that
helping clients is fine.
okay? And then there's another part of this which seems to be like supporting product managers. Is that right?
Yeah, and designers, but yeah.
And designers. Okay. So in Wardley mapping, like oftentimes we start with purpose, and what we're doing right now is we're doing a little bit of catch up because I don't think we've ever have we spoken before? Is this kind of like our
I think we're
first
on a
time?
call like once before, a long time
Okay,
ago.
yeah. So we're kind of like catching up on a lot of context, and I'm like, what game are you playing, right? What is the
Right.
purpose that you were here to sort of orient your body towards and do work in that direction? So this is helpful for me. So I'm just thinking, all right, yeah. So this is a little bit about Kennedy's purpose in this situation. So then let's zero in a little bit on the template and the lists, right? So in order to understand the situation better, whoops, hopefully I haven't made this too horrifically big, but in order to understand the situation better, I want to know who's being served. And we've kind of got like two kinds of users implied already, but let's start with one of them. Who in this work are you expecting to serve in this context? Is it just clients at large, product managers, designers? Like, how do you cut it in your mind? How do you think about those?
Sure. Yeah, I think about it. I think there's like there are kind of two groups, right? There are kind of our internal team, right? It's product managers and designers. And then yeah, there's kind of the clients basically, right? And folks with, I think the way we describe it is like folks with ambitious missions, but that's kind of the the boilerplate. But like folks who are trying to do interesting and valuable things with technology in their businesses.
Okay. So I'm gonna just put a couple sticky notes down here, and we can just like fill these out. Usually, I start off by making people only list one user, one need, and one capability. But I just want to get the complete thoughts out of your head. Like, let's just add those. I don't know if they're personas or if they're archetypes, how you think of them, but let's just like get them on paper so we can look at them and think about them.
Yeah. So if we're talking like an individual person or an individual persona, right? I think we have probably three. We have a product manager. We have a designer, and there are obviously, this is not monolithic, and there's a lot of overlap in these roles and whatever. We can talk about that some.
Totally.
And then we use the internal term of like a courageous executive, right?
Got it.
And can I spell? Nope. Cannot spell.
I don't even try anymore.
Yeah, a courageous executive is trying to move things forward with technology.
Yeah. Okay. So then, which one of these is most interesting you in this moment? Like, which of these kinds of archetypes do you have thoughts about, worries, concerns, or just interest in general? Which tend to be kind of your area of interest?
Yeah. So, I the way I'm thinking about this problem, right? One of the ways that I kind of describe what I do as product manager is like this is generic, but I try and help users in ways that also help the business, right? This is kind of a generic way to describe it. In this case, I think the way I'm thinking about this problem is I'm trying to help our team, our staff, grow in ways that will also be helpful to our clients, right? Like they can grow in all kinds of interesting ways, and I would love for them to learn mixed martial arts and whatever they want, right? But the specific thing that I'm going to invest my time in my new role is helping them learn skills that will also be helpful to our clients, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And so would you say that's in your framing of this, what the value that they're getting from the work that you're doing is oriented towards that as a purpose or as a need that we're trying to meet?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. So let's add that under the need real quick, and let's continue this down a little bit.
Is that good?
That's fabulous. Okay, so we've got kind of like the top to bottom here. Is it for both product managers and designers that have the developing skills towards helping clients? Is that right, or is there?
No, I think that's
okay,
correct. I think there's not a distinction there. Yeah.
Cool.
I
Excellent.
think the distinction will start to happen in like the specific skills between those.
Fabulous.
But I think in general.
Okay. So then there's like some interesting questions about what those skills might be, but let's talk a little bit about the meta system. Like what is the system for building these skills? And like when you think about like you're trying to design something that fulfills this benefit, right? Actually fulfills the need for these users. What kind of capabilities is the system, or perhaps you are leveraging in the moment to actually produce those kinds of benefits?
Yeah. So I think there's like a few pieces of it, right? There is some kind of like articulation of what those skills are.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know how you would encompass that. But like there are, I would say maybe the skills themselves are kind of in some kind of articulation of what they are, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say list of skills. It's fine. We can talk about
it. Yeah,
later.
Absolutely. We're making up concepts as we go oftentimes with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think there are, in general, kind of just this kind of concept of resources, right? There are, and this can be a lot of things. I'm genericizing here, and we can break it down more if you think that'd be helpful. But kind of books and courses and all kinds of different ways you could learn about a thing, right?
Yeah.
I think that we need some aspect of coaching and support.
Okay.
As you learn those skills, right? I think oftentimes it's often better when you're trying to learn new skills to have someone to bounce ideas off of and to coach you through things and to explain concepts that have some experience with those skills. And I think maybe the last big bucket I might add is a context to practice, basically, right? To not just learn academically, but to learn practically.
Yeah, that's a really important point too. Part of what we're doing right now is we're building up a little bit of a vocabulary that we can use to have a conversation. I often describe it almost as like set pieces to a play that we're about to put on, where it's like we
Sure.
need these props in order to have these kinds of conversations. And what wasn't discussable before you started writing down, basically. So now we can
Right.
discuss things like coaching and support and having a list of skills, like what is that knowledge of like what the skills could be or are or what
Right.
have you, and then educational resources and a place to actually do the work. And so now we can
Yeah.
have a conversation like, okay, context to practice, that makes a lot of sense. If you're just accruing knowledge, like you're not learning anything because you're not putting it into action.
Right.
But if you're just acting without any background theory, then also that's problematic, right? So
It's an inefficient. It's not impossible, but it's probably very inefficient.
yeah, okay. So before we jump into making this a value chain, David, I wanted to just check in with you, like thinking about your experience sort of in a designerly way of thinking about users and needs and how to build things. Like what's on your mind when you think about trying to meet the needs of product managers and designers, in particular with helping them develop skills? Like have you had any experiences around this kind of thing?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm like nodding in agreement, like as you're talking with all of this stuff, Kennedy, because it hits close to home in my own experience. One of learning myself, and then also with teams that I've been a part of, or helping lead. And I think so often we miss one of these four things, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's more, but
Yeah.
these feel pretty core. Often there's I've seen a lot of the practice without the theory, and then I've also seen a lot of theory without the practice. Those tend to be
Right.
where people forget to do one or the other. But this feels really good. I think it's a good place to start, like building our map of like what are the enabling constraints for us to
Yeah.
get rolling on helping folks develop useful skills.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and part of what I'm thinking about here too is just, having these skills on a list doesn't mean that everything's done, right? It's not that we have the perfect model. It doesn't, all that kind of stuff. Like you've heard that 1,000 times before. Probably everyone here watching this has heard that 1,000 times. We don't need to have even a good model to start with. We just need a starting place, because when we go through the process, we'll uncover things and we'll learn things, and like it'll play out, and then we'll know things we didn't know before. And knowledge is power, because you literally see places to intervene in the system, design possibilities that you couldn't have even imagined because you didn't know that was a place you could do designing. And so in this way, like this knowledge actually creates power. But the paradox is oftentimes you can't know what map to make until you've
Right.
made a map, because the map will tell you what kind of map to make next. And so it's just about getting enough of a foothold on this first pass through, like on draft zero, if you will. So fabulous. So let's get all these sticky notes copied over to the value chain section, if you don't mind. Could I ask you to do that? Just copy those over. And
Hold on. Let me lock this background section.
oh, did I just?
What's happening? There's a secret sticky over here.
Oh, that's it.
I got it.
Ha! Yeah, I'm still learning some of the mural secrets and things like that. But okay, excellent. So you've got those copied over. Fabulous.
Past this. Let me just do one thing really quickly. And there we go.
Excellent.
That's what's going on. I'm just pushing that to the back. You can
Cool.
push elements all the way to the back, which is for background things like this is helpful.
Excellent. All right. I know I just covered up some stickies and they were hiding back there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make this a value chain. And so this is the second step in making, well, okay, it's like to make a physical map, it's the second step, but in the strategy process from Simon Wardley's perspective, it's probably like there's purpose first, and then there's making the map itself, doing the landscape thing. And inside the landscape thing, we kind of have to know the lists, the lists of users, lists of needs, lists of capabilities. And then we turn those lists into a value chain. And what makes it a value chain is the relationships. So what depends on what else? And I think fortunately for like draft 0, we've kind of already set up a pretty straightforward situation. It just kind of like reads top to bottom for the most part. Is that the way that the relationships work from your perspective, Kennedy? Like, does that?
More or less, yeah. I think that like, and this is, I'll just like speak a little bit. This is one of the things that actually, this specifically is one of the things that drew me to Wardley mapping early on, is that I had like read Porter and like was familiar with the idea of value chains, right? And found that diagram that he has in what is it's called strategy, competitive strategy. I found that to be like so disappointing in the sense that it's like very hand wavy in terms of how a value chain actually works, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like I found this to be a very kind of satisfying way of thinking about like, you know, we take a capability, or we take a thing, and then we do something to it, and there's more value in it, and we do something to it, more value, and then we provide it to a user to solve the problem. Anyway.
And like what I think about too is that there's almost like a biological kind of nature to it. Like if you think of it as a system, like each of these parts have a certain level of performance or living. And in a way, like the way that those parts interact and come together produces that value. And so if one of them starts dying off because it's like, I don't know, from a work standpoint, maybe it's not doing so well because there's too much work in progress or whatever it ends up being, like whatever the health issue of that thing is, then the rest of the chain starts to decay a little bit because an underlying supporting thing is falling apart. So having the value chain defined helps us troubleshoot it. Yeah, David.
And from a design and product perspective, just the visualization fits a lot better with a lot of the tools we're used to using. If I'm thinking about the same Porter diagram you're talking about, it's like a big box of like a bunch of words, and visually it doesn't communicate the same way. I'll just put it that way, where this communicates in a way that, at least as a product person, I have been more familiar with in the past. So it's easier to kind of go, oh yes, I get this right away.
I feel like Kennedy's flipping through a book that he literally has on his shelf right now. He's like, "Where's the?"
I mean, I got Porter out. Like I just got Porter out. We can do this.
We could just do that.
I'll find it out.
I love it.
For people who don't have the context, I probably grabbed the wrong one. Anyway, we can keep going.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, if I do an images search for like Porter's value chain, just said Porter's vodka was one of the top results. So I don't know what that's all about.
This is what it looks like.
Yep, excellent. Exactly, and I've got that up on my screen as well. Fabulous. Okay, so let's make it a value chain. Let's actually add those relationships. And I love a messy version of this where you just take the pen tool and you draw it and stuff. But because we're in Mural, I guess you can also do line connections as well, can't you?
Yeah, they have good arrows, and actually the way the pen tool works in Mural is kind of a mess. It like lays. It's not good. It's not good. Let's just say that.
Okay, fair enough. I'll use it sparingly then for this session. But all right.
Yeah.
So the as you are working on putting those relationships together, I'll kind of pontificate on a little bit. So these relationships from top to bottom, like in a map, what we're doing is we're focusing on the value we're providing real people out in the wide world, right? So the users are at the top, their needs are just underneath, and there are lots of ways to represent needs. We won't get into that now. There's some articles you can read. But by adding these relationships, what we're doing is we're defining what needs what else. So like you could almost add like a little bit of text next to each thing, where the word is like needs, and you could put that next to each of these relationships, where you could read it like a sentence basically. What needs what else? What depends on what else? And that goes all the way down the value chain, all the way down to the bottom. And one of the ways you can know that you've constructed a good value chain, or at least a value chain that is like structurally coherent, like it might not be right in terms of reality, but that at least is the right form of the ideas, is can you read it as a sentence? Can you start at the top and say, okay, product managers and designers depend on developing skills that are helpful to our clients. Developing skills that are helpful to our clients depends on what those skills actually are, the coaching and support that they get, and having a context to practice in. And so if you can read it like a sentence like that, then you're on the right track. And I see Kennedy's kind of got us in good shape here. Fast work,
Yeah. So
I should say.
thanks. I spend a lot of time on Mural these days.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so we got these four things, and then I went ahead and added kind of I wanted to incorporate this and kind of like yes, skills that are helpful to our clients is a need, and I think we can talk about why this is the need specifically for these folks because it's a need in this professional context. But I wanted to also talk about like this need and kind of show it more directly, right? Well, they need consulting services, and we can break that down at all kinds of stuff, and that also requires skills, people with skills.
Yep, absolutely. And just taking a note, a moment here to point out that already we've started to define what reality is in play in the situation that you're thinking about. We've talked about who we're here to serve. We've talked about what their needs are. We've talked about some of the basic capabilities that are in play in order to help produce those benefits, those needs, to make this whole system work in the first place by coming together and producing those needs. For most people, like who have never done Wardley mapping before, if you get to this point, you have done probably more work in terms of making sense of the system than you might have been used to doing in years past, right? Like, you don't have to get all the way to the end where you have a Wardley map and like the perfect Wardley map and evolution, all this kind of stuff to get value from the system. Like, even just making lists like we did over here on the left can unlock a lot of good discussions and a lot of good moments of going, oh, that's what's going on. All right. So I just want to acknowledge that real quick. How are you feeling about this system so far?
Good. Yeah, pretty good. I think there's provide services, we need skills. Although there's an aspect like that's somewhere in here. I don't know exactly how to frame this. Where like you don't actually need like the abstract idea or this list of skills. You need like the manifestation of it. So to some extent, this actually looks like this, if I'm honest. Even though we're talking about this work in the context of these folks, right? But like,
yep,
this is kind of really what's happening.
Oh, so
extent,
I love that you just did that.
To provide these skills.
James Fairbairn like literally was just commenting about that, I think. He's like, don't consulting services need the product manager and designer?
Yeah, basically, right? And so like really, yes, we're thinking about this, and this is kind of helping people understand their role in this larger system and how they can, improve, to your point, kind of let's call it improve the health of the node in a kind of very generic way, but like more specifically, like how they can better contribute to these outcomes our clients are trying to get, right? Like, even though this is our focus, this is why we're doing it, right? And you can kind of see the more meta chain.
I love that. So we just had a semantically dense conversation about what our intent for the system is and where we really fit into it and everything. And like, man, getting alignment on just that part of the system is going to make the rest of it just enormously easier. Thank you, Manish. I appreciate it. I'm glad you got an aha moment from this. And Raul, so he mentions, I would say we need to do the other three for each skill in the list of skills. So I think he was looking at educational resources, coaching and support, context and practice.
Right.
And so now I have a question. So is this list of skills, is this literally like a manifest of what skills we need? Or is it more of like the abstract notion of, for a given skill that we've identified? Like, talk to me a little bit about what that part is.
Yeah, so the thing that I'm thinking about, the way I'm kind of thinking about this is like there are inherently some skills that are more or less valuable. There are and this is another thing, there are new skills that crop up, right? People, hey, we need someone who can be a product manager for some sort of streaming data situation, like whatever. And that's like wasn't a common skill 10 years ago, and is a very common it's not common, but is a skill people need these days, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so there's there's always this like kind of evolving set of what these skills are, right?
Yep.
And then for each of those skills, yes, we need educational resources. We need a context in which to practice them. You need coaching. I don't know how I guess you need coaching that is at least has some context and kind of can speak to those skills themselves, right? So to some extent, yeah, I think I would agree with that, right? Is that there's this like set of skills, capabilities, whatever that we need, that these folks need in order to provide the consulting services, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then, yeah, anyway, does that make sense?
Well, it's making me start to think about evolution in particular, because for each of these skills is somewhere along that dimension of evolution. Like if it's a skill that is just starting to like form and it's in genesis, then well, yeah, like the only way to do any work there is to literally like make it out of nothing.
Right.
and hopefully like
Right.
we have
like,
support
we
for
won't have
that.
a lot of resources. Like we will be throwing those resources off as we go.
Exactly. And then like as it shifts into custom from stage 1 to stage 2, then it's like, oh, well, okay, this is an emerging skill. Like maybe we go hire some weird folks who know a little bit about this to teach us their ways. Like it's the domain of experts. And then over time, like as it shifts into product, like okay, now you're starting to get like here's the 10-step program.
Now it's something we can put it on a job listing as like
Yep.
one of 10 things, and someone will go, yes, I have that skill.
Yeah. But like what about like skills that have completely commoditized? Like would coaching ever be there in that context?
Yes, I think, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
So one of the patterns we see a lot at ThoughtWorks and other places is we have designers or developers or people with QA background or whatever, project managers, who want to move into product management.
Okay.
And like there's this set of core skills of product management that I think are to some extent commoditized, right? Like you would not hire a product manager who didn't have these skills. Like it is expected behavior. And it's not even kind of expected differentiated behavior, where like lately we've been hiring a lot of technical product managers, right? And I would describe that as like it's a list of skills we can put in a job description. People understand what they mean. They're fairly standard. I'd put them kind of in that product-y space, right?
Okay.
That stage 3 space. But not everyone has them, and they are distinct enough still that we would that we call them out as a separate set of skills that are kind of exist on top of kind of this base set of product management expectations, let's say. And yeah, I think you know, as we make that transition, you would want coaching and you would want support to make that transition into this new role, right? So I don't think it's kind of the user I guess gets a little weird in that context, because it's people who want to be product managers, people who want to be designers, rather than people who kind of are. We also have like a robust, you know, entry level program for designers and stuff in like the same context, right?
Yeah, and James like adds some additional commentary here, which I think is very much in line with what we're just discussing now. Like, what about skills that are commoditized? Well, just because it's commoditized doesn't mean everyone has it, nor that it's easy to pick up and play with. Like, right, and as a metaphor, like we always talk about like what kinds of things are commoditized, stage 4 in evolution. Like, if we're talking about technology, it's well, like power generation is almost like the classic example we always talk about. Oh, like the power, it's just a wall socket, it's just there. But like when I'm building a house, it doesn't mean that I have the skills to actually unlock that capability. Like I don't know the code, like the building codes for actually making power work. I don't even know how to assemble electricity safely, and so on. Yeah. Mary Stevens in the comments mentions it can be cheaper to grow skills in-house than hiring from outside. And I think that's an interesting point, and one that I'm sure that you do a lot of work with when it comes to thinking about Scrum.
It's kind of precisely what we're talking about this.
Yeah, very, very concisely put. Okay, so now I'm going to go to lwm.events/2 to get the second part of this template, and I'm going to copy this into the mural board. I love how everyone gets to see I have the Tabby Cats extension installed in my browser, so every time I open a new tab, a new Tabby Cat with a new weird little name. Like this one's name is Fluffy Treasure Chest.
About that.
Prickly Thunderball, my favorite. Anyway, not to get too distracted. Okay, so I've got the Wardley map on here, and I'm going to lock it down. I'm just going to grab your value chain if I can, and I'm going to copy it over to the Wardley map. And something that I do, and I don't know if you do this typically, Kennedy, when you make maps, is I have this like weird little kind of section up here specifically focused on users, where it's like it's another way to talk about evolution specifically in terms of user needs. Yeah. So let's talk about this real quick. Let's get this laid out in the next like 5-ish minutes, let's just get everything in place in terms of evolution, like a tentative position. But let's start with the user,
Yeah.
consulting services. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
On where this kind of falls in the evolutionary chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, and this is kind of an interesting question. I would say that we're kind of right in this edge space, right?
Hmm.
I think that, and again, services themselves are kind of like skills in the same way, right? We have some services that are kind of very novel and we're still figuring out, and we don't even have names for, and we're just kind of doing on the side because somebody asked us to, because we have a good relationship with the client, we're just doing it. We have other ones that we're kind of like are very well defined, right? I think interestingly, at least for our organization, we don't do a lot of like staff augmentation or just kind of kind of very well-defined contract work. Like we always want to be involved in kind of figuring out what the solution is and then building that solution, right? So we don't really, as an organization, we don't kind of play down here really. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just kind of how we approach the business.
Yeah.
And so I would say kind of we kind of tend to, there's always this kind of moving target here.
Yep.
If you were to break it up. But like on average, we're probably somewhere in this space, kind of right into that productized space where we can clearly describe what it is, what the value of the service is, but it's still kind of relatively novel, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And thinking about just evolution in general, like whenever you're having trouble figuring out where to put something along the evolutionary axis in your Wardley map, one of the tricks is exactly as Kennedy just described, is you can break it down. Because a lot of times there are more than just that one concept hiding behind the words. Like consulting services in one context are distinct from consulting services in a different context. And so being able to sort of create new vocabulary to distinguish and disambiguate those two different things is a skill. It's a really important skill for this kind of technique. And I noticed also Kat Swattel in the comments mentioned that she's super interested in skills liquidity. And for those of you who are interested in generally like how do we manage the capabilities and the skills that we have in our organization? How do we proactively like think about that? And it's important for not only just succession planning, but also like what capabilities and skills are we going to need in order to actually put into practice these to actually do these strategies? If you wait until you're doing it to find that out, like you're gonna have a bad time. But for anyone who wants to learn about skills liquidity, like literally Google Kat Swattel skills liquidity. She gave a talk on it. It's fabulous. You should go check that out.
Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting you bring that up, right? It's a little bit more obvious in a consulting firm in that like the thing we sell is those skills, like in a kind of pretty direct way. Whereas like a lot of organization, there's some intermediate steps before you actually get to the value, right?
Yeah. Okay. So let's take this to the next step. Let's get these capabilities sorted out. And I think I'm just going to let you work to do that.
Sure.
And if you want to sort of like verbalize a little bit about what you're thinking as you go along.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Awesome.
David, I'd love your opinion on this too, but I think that as a field, design and software design and stuff is a little bit, neither are kind of super, I think design is kind of getting towards this edge. I think product management is a little bit less for what it's worth, in terms of how common those roles are and how often they're adopted and kind of how much value they think. I definitely don't think they are like, like payroll in the sense that, or HR kind of things that every business must have at some point. But
Yeah.
I do think they're kind of, and I specifically think design and software design is a little bit further along in that process, just in my experience.
Totally agree. I think from an organizational standpoint, that's absolutely true. As a community of practice, maybe not.
Sure.
When designers can decide whether their UX, product, UI, interaction, all of those things, which are, all decent arguments, but I think internally there's a lot of discussion of where they would fit on here. But from an organizational standpoint, I started in design UX probably 13 or so years ago, maybe longer. I still think the 80s was 20 years ago sometimes. So yeah, I think when I first started, people were kind of like, we don't really know what this is and we don't really know why we need one, but our investors said we do. And now, with boot camps, with developers, designers, even product
Oh,
folks.
for sure.
Now, there's a lot more like people kind of understand what it is and want to be in that field, and organizations largely know they need them.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, I think, yeah, design is like, there's, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. This is where you get into like, this is a rabbit hole. We can ignore it. We can ignore it for now. You still see a lot of business analysts, and you still see a lot of folks with roles that aren't product management and don't kind of take that skill set and that approach to the work of, call it product definition. Folks are writing big PRDs still and stuff. That still happens. But the work of design, I think, and that skill set that's associated is a little bit more standardized in my experience. Although I think as a whole, but exactly your point, right? You get this kind of balkanization, I guess is the word I would use, of the skills. Anyway, developing skills. I think, so like skills development as an idea, right? This is where it gets tricky, I think, right? Is that like, well, helpful to our clients is the thing I'm going to key on here, right? That is always changing. And that is, I think, unique to us as an organization, right? So I'm actually going to pull that, all the way up here, in the sense that I think that our clients, in this case, is Thoughtworks for Work. And I think that skill set is kind of a custom. We are kind of both thinking about what exactly we need for our offerings based on all kinds of different things and the customers we work with. And also, I think that it is a bit of a gamble in the sense that we are also trying to look forward and say, what skills will we need in the future? And we have to we are making bets, and it's not kind of well known. And it's not kind of, we see some user demand for it, and we're also kind of placing bets. So I think that's kind of in this same area, but kind of maybe on the other side of that product custom line.
There's a quick question
if you have any.
That came up about putting users on the map or putting them left to right in terms of evolution. And I just wanted to sort of quickly go back to that. Like, yes, we've got the courageous executive at the sort of top as a user, but we were also talking about product managers and designers as users themselves. But there's a linguistic thing that I noticed you did. Whenever talking about product managers and designers in terms of evolution, instead of thinking about people, you switched over to the field. And
yeah.
I think that's interesting because on the one hand, like, those are two different things that hide behind those labels, but at the same time, like, you're also putting the field itself in terms of evolution, which is, I think, a good important framing for the conversation that we're having as well.
Yeah. I didn't realize I did that. Cool.
We do lots of like weird, fun stuff with words whenever we're mapping. You start to like pick up on it, and it's like, oh, that means something, or oh, we're using that two different ways. Like, it's fun. Excellent.
Yeah. And moving on, right? I think context to practice. Again, these are, I don't remember who you said this, but these are kind of very dependent on the skill itself, right? Which is kind of interesting. But like, let's say in aggregate, right? This list of skills, I think, is also going to be kind of a custom thing. A context to practice them in is inherently, I think, going to be more evolved. I think it's going to be more evolved, right? I think that you need a context to practice them in, and that context needs to be amenable to it. And inherently, kind of as we're developing new skills, that if we didn't have a context to learn them or create them, they wouldn't exist, right? Like, we wouldn't have a context in which to create them. So I kind of think that lives a little bit farther down that line. I think educational resources, on the other hand, kind of lags that same system, right? Is that we kind of create this practice, create these things, then we kind of codify it later. So that would probably lag it a bit. Although, and this is where it's tricky, right? Depending on like resources themselves, like LinkedIn Learning exists. There's courses everywhere for a lot of this stuff. There's books, depending on the skill, right? And so like the book itself, or I don't know.
I'll throw something out there a little controversial. What if education was a commodity?
How dare you?
No, it's interesting. I you know what I think I'm going to do, actually, is I think I'm actually going to say this list of skills, right? I'm gonna go back on what I said a second ago, because I think I'm gonna start thinking about it specifically. This is where we get into that semantic thing, right? It was like the field versus
Yep.
what we need specifically in our context. And I think developing skills that are helpful to our clients is definitely over here. I'm fairly confident about that. But when we talk about a list of skills, that you kind of, to some extent, define these roles by that list of skills, right? And like, yeah, it'll lag it a little bit, or it'll kind of, I think it'll be kind of very similar to the role itself, or kind of the state of the role in the market itself, right?
Hmm.
Um, hmm.
That's really fascinating because, like, what is a role?
Right.
Like, what is a product manager? What is a designer? Like, it's almost like when we define it in terms of its skills, like we start to we start to take it apart in terms of that kind of stuff. Then we run smack into the wall of like all the stuff that nobody talks about, but everybody does in that role. Like product managers
Right.
are like almost famous, infamous, I don't know, for doing a lot of like behind the scenes kind of like connection, coordination, social communication stuff.
Right.
But like, what do you write in a job description about that? Like, what do you put in the list of skills that describes that?
Right.
And I really don't know the
I
answer
mean,
to that.
yeah, like if you're, yeah. Sorry, you're saying.
No, no, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think that like if we're talking about ThoughtWorks, like this lives here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I almost feel like there's a reason this is pulled this far left, right? And I don't,
Mm.
I'm trying to like parse why that is, because I kind of think that there's this thing of like, I don't know, maybe I'll break this down a little bit and see if this helps. There's like this list of role specific skills, right? Which is like kind of what I still really can't spell today. Role specific role specific skills. And that is, I think, kind of, probably fairly similar, probably slightly less evolved, because I think there's like, there's disagreement about these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think kind of defined in the context of these, like there is this list of role specific skills, right? And there's also these, I think, like org specific skills, right? And that is the kind of thing that's
Yeah.
really kind of living way out here.
Yeah. So like, I like what you just did there, where you looked at developing skills that are helpful to our clients. Why is that so far behind in terms of evolution? Why is it back in custom when these other things we're talking about are like pushing into product space, kind of like what is the part of the value chain that is actually holding us back? And so you kind of ask the question, what's missing? Because like clearly like
Yeah.
there wasn't enough of a reasonable explanation for you to believe that this is the system that was in play. So then you
Right.
found this list of org specific skills. It's like, oh, that's a huge constraint. And the beauty of relationships in a value chain is that they're both enablers. Like
Right.
you couldn't develop skills that are helpful to clients without like a list of role specific skills, perhaps, but also they're constraints. They hold you back.
Right.
So if they're underperforming or they're underdeveloped, underevolved, they'll hold the thing that depends on them back. So that's interesting. Okay. And I like Christopher is mentioning in chat, like maybe hard skills and soft skills are in different sections, and
Yeah.
like part of the decision making as a map maker is deciding where to invest your attention. Like, do you invest your
Right.
attention in breaking down what the skills are? Do you invest your attention in trying to basically enumerate all of the potential dependencies for developing skills that are helpful to our clients? I think there's no right answer to that, but you as a map maker and the people that you make maps with will notice things, and then you'll kind of follow what is interesting or follow where you think there's learning to be had.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Cool.
right.
Yeah, I think, yeah, maybe I think we need to wrap this up soon enough. But yeah, let's maybe one last stab at this, and we can call it a day for today.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I kind of think that like we need these things, right? But also these are, to some extent dependent on that list, right? Like this is a context, like what context you need is, I think, dependent on what that skill is, right?
Yep.
Um, and the same is kind of true. This is going to get messy, but it's all right.
Messiness is the name of the game for sure.
And the same is kind of true all the way across, right? And I think that I almost kind of wonder if, like we want to do this way, right? Like just kind of blow it all the way out. Because I think inherently these things, actually coaching and support I think is not, but I think these two are. Like I think these are both kind of, we need to find some pretty specific, this is kind of this, and I don't know if I even need to like do this now. Like I think it's fine.
There's this little moment where like you just do a bunch of work.
Let me give her this list of thing, and it's like org specific skills, right? It's fine. Like we know what we're talking about here. And then coaching and support I think is separate, and then I think in the same way, interestingly, I think it's more likely for us to have context, right? And like this is kind of doing this thing a little bit, which is kind of interesting, coaching and support. And then I think for the role specific skills, yes, to your point, David, I think that's like way over here almost.
Yeah, for anything that's kind of standard, a lot of the education, if it's lagging, it's old and kind of commodified, and then the new things get built on top of the old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
this is so helpful to sort of get a more, not only the model that you have for the system, but also just in general, what kinds of ways we can cut things apart and pay attention to them. This is really interesting. And one of the things I always like play with too is like the difference between an abstract concept of a thing and then the specific instances of that thing. And like org specific skills as a concept is where it is, but then when you start thinking about the specific skills that exist, like they're all over the spectrum. And
sure.
You might need like for one set of skills, like to do consulting in general, like for example, to know how to give a presentation to an executive audience, for example, like that is an org specific skill in some ways, right?
And like that whole set of consulting skills is not always bundled into like product management design.
And how do you like what context, like what is the context to practice in that case?
Right.
And like you might need an actual call with actual executives in order to have that experience, but that's gonna be very different with a different skill, which is I think part of this. All right. Okay. Sorry about if this is unreadable, folks. I'm sorry. I'll try to like pay attention to this to make sure that the zoom is where it needs to be and so on. Thanks for keeping me in check here. I appreciate that. All right. So final thoughts, Kennedy, and then I'd like I want to make sure people know where to find you, to follow you, to ask you questions, things like that. What's your handle? What's a way for people to find you?
Yeah, at Kennedy Collins on Twitter. If you want to shoot me an email, it's my first name at my first name and then my last. I'm not typing this. I always do that when I'm typing. It's Kennedy at KennedyCollins.com if you want to shoot me an email, or Kennedy at Kennedy.Collins@thoughtworks.com if it's a work related thing. If this was interesting to you and you want to be a person who thinks about these skills, we're hiring product managers and designers.
Fabulous. Thanks so much. And as a parting note, what's something that you're thinking differently about after making this map? Like what's the big difference for you, or what kind of shifts have occurred since we started this process today? I guess I'll ask it that way.
Yeah, I think that a couple of things, right? I think that this was really helpful in terms of kind of enumerating kind of the things that we'll need to develop these skills, right? When it was kind of just like a vague thing for me before. And then the other thing is kind of thinking about, and I don't think I've gotten there yet, but I think it's gotten me on a good starting place anyway, which is like, how this is different for different specific skills, how this is different for different clusters of skills, and how we can kind of think about those things and what that means for kind of how we support folks and what kind of resources we provide folks and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And Barbara Frontera mentioned in the comments, like dealing with specific kinds of struggles around here. Like how do you deal with individual incentives versus like what's in it for me as a person to learn these skills versus what the org needs itself, and starting to have those kinds of conversations and play with those tensions. You need to have at least a basic common understanding of the situation in order to have those. So thank you so much, Kennedy, for being here. And I really appreciate your flexibility and your willingness to jump on a stream and talk about what's going on in your mind, the problems that you're thinking about. Thank you, David, for being here and taking care of the chat for me, and also for your perspective on design. I couldn't do this without you. Yeah, I'm just grateful to all of you who showed up and joined the stream as well. I care about you. I appreciate you. If you want to check out our upcoming events, go to lwm.events. There's a new stream already scheduled for next week. In fact, I think it is with Mary Stevens. We're going to talk about some data-related stuff, which is going to be exciting. She and I have some shared academic, technical background with higher ed and things like that, so that should be fun. And if you want to come on the stream and do some mapping with us live, let me know. You can find me on Twitter @HiredThought. You can also email me, ben@hiredthought.com. Any final words? Any final words? Any final words or thoughts, David or Kennedy, before we jump off?
No, thank you so much. It's been great.
Fabulous.
I just want to say, if you do want to learn more from Ben and myself, we also have a workshop coming up.
Oh, right.
That you can join. I don't mean to like upsell the conversation, but I'm really excited about the workshop.
Me too. It's gonna be fun.
And I always have a really good time with everyone. So if you want to do more of this yourself, we have a half-day workshop. I think it's next Wednesday.
I do believe so. It's in a week. All right, yeah. lwm.events to go check that out. Thank you all. Have a lovely day. Oh, wait, I have a catchphrase. I'm going to try a catchphrase. Knowledge is power, so go create some knowledge. How's that?
That was great.
We'll workshop it. All right. See you, everybody.